And I'm joined now by José Raúl Perales. He is the Director of the Americas Department at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. Thanks for joining us.
Delighted to be here.
When we look at this gathering of CELAC, and it's a relatively young organization, as we've been reporting, just 3 years old, is this gathering more of a symbolic effort by these nations to distance themselves from the United States and Canada, or is there potential here for something substantive to be achieved?
Well, that is precisely the question that's being discussed in Havana. For several years, Latin American countries, some key countries in specific, have been pushing the idea that the countries of the continent ought to be meeting among themselves without the United States, Canada, or other developed countries, and to discuss things that are pertinent to the region, but discussed by the countries of the region, and not so much without outside influence. And of course, always in the agenda is the question of economic integration, more trade, and what kind of trade. But things also about social progress, tackling inequality, poverty, and some of the bigger problems of the continent, the responsible management of resources. So there certainly will be a pursuit of that in Havana and in the process that continues after the summit.
And how would it all differ from, say, other groupings, like, say, NAFTA or UNASUR?
Well, they're all characteristically different. CELAC has there's no treaty that provides rules for how CELAC ought to behave. There's a set of rules commonly agreed by the countries. There's no sanctioning mechanism if a country fails to meet certain obligations under CELAC. This is a negotiated document that comes out as a result of the meetings that are taking place today. CELAC is not proposing the free movement of goods and services the same way that NAFTA did. So again, it's very much a forum at this point, and it is a forum for Latin American countries to discuss issues pertaining to the region among themselves without the formality and the institutional channels available in other fora.
Right, but when we look at a group like this and its relationship with the rest of the world, I mean, which regional blocs in the world have the most influence on countries, like the countries in CELAC? Would it be the United States, or would it be China, or would it be the European Union?
Well, that's a very interesting question, because precisely the reason for CELAC to come about is Latin American countries, as they grow more in clout in the world, to say we don't need the influence of other countries, we stand as a bloc, and we're here to tell the world that we want to do certain things a certain way. Now, it is important that China has played a huge role in terms of a lot of the economic assertiveness of countries in Latin America, because trade with China has become an important factor for many important countries in the continent, from Brazil to Chile to Argentina, Peru. So that certainly has been a factor in support of this. But other countries still maintain a tremendous amount of influence. The United States maintains a tremendous amount of influence in the continent. It is still the #1 trading partner for many of the countries in the continent. Plus, the United States brings to Latin America things that other countries do not do. In particular, when U.S. companies invest in the countries in the region, it isn't just to do business. They invest in the communities of the country. There's technology transfers. There are associations that are built on a continental basis that countries don't do, and the same thing with Europe. So I don't see this as necessarily being a contest of influence over Latin America, more as a way of Latin Americans saying, we have something to say.
Yeah, and I'm just wondering what kind of influence a grouping like CELAC would have. I mean, they combined GDP of this bloc is around 6 trillion. That makes them the third largest economic power in the world.
Well, that is precisely the question, whether they can act as a bloc. Right now, we have different versions, for example, of what the region's economic insertion in the world ought to be. You have the countries of the Pacific Alliance, Mexico, Colombia, Peru, Chile, that are seeking an outward-looking version of their global insertion, especially Costa Rica, who wants to go into, and Panama. Brazil and Argentina have a more inward-looking vision of their international insertion, meaning that they want to form a tighter bloc among themselves, and of course, this impinging upon their relationship with economic powerhouses in Europe and the United States. So the question is an important one, is whether this grouping can act as a bloc and become the force in global economy that they promise to be.
José Raúl Perales, thanks for joining us.